Hi, and welcome to our PowerPoint on writing instructions. The key points about writing instructions that you need to know. As always, think about your audience first. The next thing is to remember that if someone gets hurt following your instructions, they can sue you as well as the publishing company. Now, you may think in your own job, there's no chance that you're going to be writing instructions, but you'd be surprised how many times somebody comes and says, oh, can you just write something up for us so that somebody knows how to do this project or that? And that actually it's really important to get the facts right. If for any reason somebody could be harmed, and this doesn't mean just physically getting hurt, but financially getting hurt or anything else, it's important to have that all of the document correct. So it's got what we call the highest ethical weight for accuracy, which means that when people are following instructions, they can get harmed. And so there's even more obligation on the part of the writer to make sure that you don't get things wrong and that you position everything correctly. Clarity and conciseness are essential, both with the visuals and the text. Remember everything you learned from our last project on document design? All of that stuff is still important. You don't want a variety of huge different fonts or crazy colors that go all over the place. Everything needs to be in order and organized and thoughtfully chosen. Use short sentences that begin with active verbs, phrase instructions affirmatively, and don't leave steps out. We're going to go over these things in more detail. First of all, audience. As with any technical document, you've got to consider your audience. If they need the instructions in the first place, they may be made up of lay people, not necessarily the children in this picture, but people who are not familiar with what you're doing or what you're advising them to do. So that's going to mean that they really need to take the time to figure it out, which means that you have to give them the information as effectively as possible. Another thing to remember is the frustration factor. A lot of times people try and figure something out first, and then when they can't do it, then they come to the instructions, which means that they want things to be even clearer, even faster, which is where visuals are helpful. On the other hand, not everyone is a layperson. So if you're writing for an expert audience or people who know more about a topic, you should be an expert too yourself. And there are issues of ethics and safety to consider there. So if you're in, for example, the radiography department and you're learning about something in that and you want to write up instructions for something, you would want to be really careful, but you could also at the same time use more sophisticated language without stopping to explain any terms that would be unfamiliar to a semi-technical or layperson audience. An ethical note. If in the course of your career you're asked to write instructions for something you don't know how to do, you should say no. At one point in my own career, I was asked to write instructions for a company that did a lot of instructions books, and I just had the information sent to me, and it was on plumbing. And obviously, I shouldn't have been writing about plumbing because I didn't really know very much about it. I tried to learn as much as I could very quickly, but I wasn't aware because I was so new to my career that I was putting myself in an ethical situation that could have been dangerous for people trying to repair things, and also for me, just not good overall if anybody got hurt. Format. So a format of instructions, just like we have formats for other documents like resumes and memos, they should have obviously a title at the top of what it's for. Then the list of supplies and parts, any warnings you should know up front, but there may also be warnings in addition that happen later on throughout the document. Clear numbered steps that start at the beginning, go to the end, which seems very obvious, but that's part of the format. Diagrams and visuals wherever necessary, and they must correspond correctly to each step. So you can't just have one big visual on the side and then have the steps kind of all over the place. It has to be very clear which one goes with what. And then at the end, a troubleshooting or frequently asked questions section so that if somebody gets stuck or they just have a quick question, they can glance back there and see if they can find the answer. List your supplies and tools at the beginning. Try and make the visuals add clarity. So for example, and you can see in this picture that all of the things are exactly the size proportionally to one another that they would be if you actually had them in front of you. If you're going to do something where, let's say you were doing how to change a car tire, you don't have a huge car tire and a tiny wrench and a huge car. I mean, you want to try and keep things proportional to one another if possible. Cautions and warnings. You all know about contrasting colors and that the colors that are most often associated with cautions and warnings are oranges and yellows. And the shape that's most often associated with it is the triangle because you see triangular caution signs on roads very often, but even just a rectangle will work fine. The warnings should be placed prominently at the beginning of your document. Yes, there are some things where you will not need a specific warning, but for the most part, just be aware that they're needed. The text for instructions should be simple, plain, use active verbs and the active voice. be phrased affirmatively, and use transitions to show the sequence, making each step separate. Here's what I mean by simple language. If you look at the ketchup bottle, and then we've got on the right-hand side, commence rotation of upper portion after lower segment has received adequate pummeling. That is not simple language. The same idea is presented on the left-hand side. First, pound the bottom of the ketchup bottle, then twist off the cap. So wherever possible, when you go through in peer review or reviewing your own work, try and look for places where there's a way to make the language clearer. Active verbs. So you can see on the right-hand side again, the seatbelt should be fastened, the mirrors should be adjusted, and the key should be in the ignition. That's called passive voice. It's not clear in that sentence who is doing it. And it's all very conditional. It should be done this way, it should be done that way, but everything's sort of in a weird order with it not being very clear who the agent of the action is and the verbs not at the beginning of the sentence. So here's the alternative. Fasten your seatbelt, adjust your mirrors, turn the key in the ignition. It's clear who's being told what, and it's using active verbs. Phrasing steps affirmatively. On the right, don't leave the baby unattended. Don't leave the baby in the crib. Don't let the clothing make the baby uncomfortable. You want to phrase things without the don'ts. You want to tell people what they should do, not what they shouldn't do. Stay with the baby, pick up the baby, remove any uncomfortable clothing the baby's wearing. That's phrasing affirmatively. Using transition words to show sequence. Start paying attention to transition words as soon as possible, because in the second half of the semester, we're going to be working on research papers, and working out smooth transitions is going to make your research paper much stronger. So on the right-hand side, your child's mask shouldn't be put on first. Yours should. That way you can do theirs later since you're the adult. On the left-hand side, the better version. First, place the air mask over your own face. Next, secure the air mask for your child. Finally, breathe deeply and relax. So the transitions first, next, finally, those are called sequence transitions. There are other types as well, contrast transitions, comparison transitions, and so forth. But you can see that in instructions, sequence transitions are probably the one you will use most. Make the steps separate. On the right-hand side, call the police. If you're writing for a layperson audience who needs to read instructions on this or practice up, it's probably a child. So maybe a first or second grader who can read but may not be that familiar with the steps. So first pick up the telephone receiver, next listen for a dial tone, then dial 911. In this day and age of cell phones, it would be a little bit different, but again, you want to make each step separate if the audience is going to need that. Here's some other things. Supplemental information to instructions should include frequently asked questions or troubleshooting. Some documents for something you might be learning, making somebody be aware of, or not necessarily going to need are going to not necessarily need, cautions and warnings, but they should still have a troubleshooting in case anybody gets stuck on a step. So you're going to have to try and think as to what somebody might get stuck on. As you're working on your instructions, have somebody in your house or a friend or even a classmate, see if they can try to do what you're suggesting. And if they get stuck anywhere, then that's a helpful place for you to know about so you can stick the answer in the troubleshooting. Here's a good way to organize troubleshooting is to use a table, and sometimes a table within a table. On the left-hand side, presenting the problem. On the right-hand side, the solutions with a question and answer so that if the person's having a real struggle, they can quickly find that information. I've given you some examples here of different things that are online from WikiHow. You can think about what works and what doesn't, but obviously we also have lots of samples in our packet. So go read this section on the course packet. Now you have to think about your own instructions, pick something that you know how to do that has a reasonable number of steps and that fits with everything you've learned. And then you'll be ready for your peer review. Remember, when you do peer review, that you should download, after the comments are on, download a copy of it with the comments, then go and edit it so that your final draft doesn't have comments, because you're going to upload both. And that's it.